I never thought I'd find myself writing something like this. I used to think that as long as you put in the effort, showed your love, and treated your partner with respect, you'd have a good marriage. For a long time, I thought that was what Katie and I had. We'd been married for 9 years, met in college, and shared a lot of firsts together. She was the only person I'd ever truly trusted, the one I always went to when I needed advice or support. Our lives were entwined in every way possible, or so I thought. Things started changing about a year ago, subtly at first. She became more distant, less interested in spending time together, and almost dismissive when I tried to plan something for us. At first I brushed it off, assuming she was just busy with work or going through a phase. But the distance kept growing. Suddenly, we were barely having sex anymore. She started going out with friends more often, spending long hours, working late, and keeping her phone closer than ever. Every time I brought it up, she just laughed it off, saying I was overthinking or being paranoid. A few weeks ago, I finally noticed just how secretive Katie had become with her phone. She wouldn't let it out of her sight. If she left the room, the phone went with her. When it buzzed, she'd either ignore it completely or glance at it with a weird little smirk before putting it face down on the table. I tried to ignore the growing suspicion, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One night, she came home around 2 a.m., reeking of perfume that wasn't hers and acting overly cheerful, almost too friendly, you know? When she crashed into bed beside me, I finally gave in to the temptation and picked up her phone while she was asleep. I hadn't done this before, not in our entire relationship, but this felt like the only way I could get any real answers. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. The first thing I saw was a text thread with someone named Jake. It was filled with emojis, late-night meetups, and far too many references to things like last night's fireworks and missing our time together. It didn't take long to realize this wasn't just some random coworker or friend. It felt like a punch to the gut. The Katie I thought I knew wouldn't be capable of this, or so I had believed. I barely slept that night. The sun peeked through the curtains, illuminating the disaster that had become my life. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to figure out how to confront her. I knew I couldn't just sit there and let this fester. When Katie woke up, she was all smiles, as if nothing was wrong. But I felt like I was on fire inside, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "Who's Jake?" I demanded, my voice sharp and heavy with emotion. The smile fell from her face in an instant. She scrambled to come up with some excuse, fumbling for her words. "Jake? Oh, he's just a coworker. We've been working on a project together," she stammered, her voice shaky. But I was done playing along. "Don't lie to me, Katie. I saw your messages." Her eyes widened, and I watched as realization sank in, turning her expression from surprise to anger. "You went through my phone?" she hissed, her tone defensive. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to spin this whole thing into a justification for her actions. "It doesn't matter. You've been lying to me. What else are you hiding?" I shot back, feeling an overwhelming mix of rage and betrayal surge through me. Katie folded her arms and leaned back, a bitter smirk on her lips. "You're being ridiculous. It's not like that. I can talk to whoever I want." The dismissive attitude in her voice was infuriating. She was trying to turn the tables on me, making me feel like I was the one in the wrong for being upset. Her words struck me like a blow, sending shockwaves through my mind. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, watching the woman I loved twist the truth into something unrecognizable. The anger boiled inside me, but underneath it all, there was this raw, gut-wrenching sadness. It felt like a part of me was shattering with every word she said. "I can't believe you do this to us," I said, my voice trembling. "After everything we've built together, you're throwing it all away for some fling?" Tears started to well up, but I fought them back. I didn't want her to see me break down. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, the pain she was inflicting on me. Katie's expression shifted, the bravado cracked just a bit. "It's not a fling. I'm not just some heartless bitch who throws away a marriage," she exclaimed, her voice rising. Yet there was something in her tone that felt almost hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I was just feeling lost, okay? You didn't notice me anymore, and Jake, he's just someone who listens. I could barely wrap my head around her excuse. You didn't think to come to me? To talk about how you felt? You just jumped into bed with someone else? My heart sank as I realized how deeply hurt I was, not just by her actions, but by her apparent disregard for our vows. The anger I felt began to mix with a profound sadness, washing over me like a wave. How could she just dismiss our years together so easily? I found myself reflecting on our relationship, questioning every moment, every laugh, every intimate touch we shared. Had it all been a lie? The memories flooded my mind, each one tinged with bitterness now that I stood there, grappling with the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I could feel my heart racing as I tried to process everything: her lies, her betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all. The anger morphed into a resolve that surprised even me. I didn't want to be just another victim in her game, the one left to pick up the pieces of a broken marriage. Look, Katie, I said, my voice steadier now. I can't just sit here and let you justify this. I need to think about what I want. Her eyes flashed with irritation, and she opened her mouth to retort, but I held up a hand to silence her. No, you don't get to speak. I need time to figure this out. Right now, I don't even know who you are anymore. I walked out of the bedroom, my mind racing. I needed space to breathe, to think, to mourn what felt like the death of our relationship. I grabbed my keys and headed to the park, where I used to go for a jog when I needed to clear my head. The fresh air hit me like a slap in the face, but it also brought a flicker of clarity. As I walked, I thought about all the moments we shared, the laughter, the plans for the future, the promises we made. It felt surreal to think that those memories could be tainted by her infidelity. I realized I couldn't just ignore what had happened. I had to make a decision. Could I trust her again? Did I want to? The answer was becoming clearer. After a long, exhausting walk, I returned home. The house felt empty, and I knew I had to face her again. Katie, I've thought about it, I said, my voice firm. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend everything's okay when it's not. I need to separate, for now, at least. I need to find myself again without you. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief and anger, but I was resolute. I wouldn't let her manipulation control my life any longer. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Moving through the motions felt like wading through thick mud. I packed my things into boxes, every item a reminder of the life we built together. The furniture, the photos, the little trinkets that held so many memories, they all felt tainted now. The silence in our home was deafening, each echo of her absence gnawing at me. Katie tried to reach out, sending texts filled with apologies and desperate pleas to talk, but I didn't respond. I needed this space to process everything. I spent hours reflecting on the relationship and the lessons buried within this painful experience. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow, but underneath it all, there was also a sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my life, confronting the truth instead of burying my head in the sand. Eventually, I found myself gaining clarity. I realized that I had ignored my own needs for far too long, trying to be the perfect husband while neglecting my own happiness. I'd become complacent, thinking that love alone was enough to sustain a marriage. But love requires work, honesty, and above all, respect. One evening, as I sat in my temporary apartment, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I thought about how betrayal can expose not just the fractures in a relationship but also the weaknesses within ourselves. I didn't know what the future held for Katie and me, but I knew I had to prioritize my well-being first. To anyone reading this who might find themselves in a similar situation, my advice is simple: trust your instincts. If something feels off, dig deeper. Don't ignore the signs just to keep the peace. Betrayal can be devastating, but it can also be a catalyst for growth and self-discovery. Learn from the pain, and don't be afraid to prioritize your own happiness. You deserve it. As the weeks turned into months, I settled into my new routine. I found a small sense of peace in the quiet of my apartment, a stark contrast to the chaotic emotional storm I had weathered. I began to rediscover parts of myself that had faded into the background during my marriage. I picked up hobbies I'd long neglected, like cooking and running, and even joined a local book club. I realized how much I'd enjoyed reading, how it had once been a passion before I became absorbed in the daily grind of married life. Through all this, I also sought therapy to help me process the emotional fallout from my marriage. It was empowering to sit down with someone who could guide me through my feelings without judgment. I learned about boundaries, self-respect, and the importance of communication, tools I had overlooked in my marriage. I started to understand that a healthy relationship isn't just about love, it's about mutual respect and trust. During our separation, Katie reached out occasionally, wanting to talk or meet up. I remained firm in my decision, knowing that engaging with her would only reopen wounds I was trying to heal. Eventually, I agreed to a conversation, curious to see if she had changed at all. When we finally met, Katie was visibly different. She seemed more vulnerable, her bravado replaced with a sincere desire to explain herself. "I've been doing a lot of soul-searching," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I didn't appreciate what we had until it was gone." While part of me wanted to believe her, I knew I had to be cautious. "Katie, it's going to take more than apologies for me to trust you again," I replied, my heart still guarded. "I need to focus on my own healing right now. I can't go back to how things were before." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing that while I still cared for her, I had to prioritize my own journey. It felt like closure, an acknowledgement of our past without the weight of unresolved anger lingering between us. I left that meeting with a sense of resolve, understanding that my journey was far from over, but I was on the right path. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I was reclaiming my identity, piece by piece. As I continued to rebuild my life, I found myself in a much healthier space, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. I had started dating again cautiously, but it felt good to connect with new people. Each date was a reminder that there's a world beyond the heartbreak, filled with possibilities and potential for genuine connections. I learned to appreciate the small moments, shared laughter over a cup of coffee, deep conversations under the stars, and the thrill of meeting someone new without the weight of old baggage. In those early stages of dating, I made it a point to be transparent about my past. I found it liberating to share my story, not as a badge of honor but as a lesson learned. Every encounter reinforced the idea that vulnerability can be a strength. It reminded me of what I deserved: honesty, respect, and love that didn't come with strings attached. I also maintained an open line of communication with Katie. After some time, we found ourselves exchanging occasional texts, nothing heavy, just checking in on each other. It felt like a necessary step in letting go of the anger that once clouded my heart. I knew she was still grappling with her choices, but I could see her trying to make amends in her life, even if it wasn't with me. Ultimately, I decided to focus on what lay ahead rather than what had been lost. I began to embrace the freedom of being single, realizing that it was an opportunity to truly know myself, to establish boundaries, and to make choices that aligned with my values. I often reflect on how far I've come, not just from the betrayal, but from the journey of self-discovery that followed. I've learned that healing is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, painful, and at times overwhelming, but it's also incredibly rewarding. I now approach relationships with a clearer perspective, knowing that love is built on trust, communication, and above all, respect. To anyone going through a similar ordeal, I want to say, take your time. Don't rush to heal or to jump back into another relationship. Use this time to discover who you are outside of your past. Surround yourself with supportive friends, seek help when needed, and know that it's okay to prioritize your own happiness. Remember, life goes on, and sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go of what doesn't serve you. You'll emerge stronger on the other side, ready to embrace a brighter future.